Welcome to LexTalks, Legal Topics Simplified,
Mm.
your companion for exploring the fascinating world of law.
Mm.
Today we're diving deep into a subject that's the bedrock of your legal journey as law students in India,
Okay.
the preamble to the Indian Constitution.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people see the preamble as just some flowery introduction,
Right?
but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's like a blueprint, a set of guiding principles that inform the entire Constitution.
Right. And we've got a mountain of sources here, articles from legal publishing platforms,
Yeah.
even a few informative blogs, and of course Wikipedia,
Of course.
all pointing to the significance of the preamble.
Yeah.
So how do we, as law students, actually use the preamble?
Mm.
Is it just something we memorize for exams, or does it have real-world application?
It's definitely not just for exams. Think of the preamble as a tool that helps you unlock the why behind the law.
Okay.
Let's say you're arguing a case about freedom of speech.
Right.
The preamble's emphasis on liberty can provide context and support for your arguments.
So it's like having this secret weapon, this foundational document that you could always refer back to.
Exactly. But to use it effectively, we need to understand where it came from. It's not like the preamble just appeared out of thin air.
Right.
It's a product of India's unique history. One source actually highlights how a series of charters and acts starting way back in the 18th century
Oh, wow.
slowly shaped India's legal landscape.
I'm seeing that here, too. There's this progression from the Charter of 1726, which brought legislative powers closer to home,
Right.
to the Charter of 1853, which introduced the concept of separating executive and legislative functions. These seem like small steps, but they were clearly laying the groundwork for something bigger.
And that something bigger was the Government of India Act of 1858.
Okay.
This act formally ended the East India Company's rule, putting the British Crown directly in charge.
Wow.
It's crucial to see how these historical developments ultimately paved the way for the Constitution we have today.
So the preamble isn't just some abstract ideal. It's deeply rooted in the realities of India's journey to independence.
Right, and that's reflected in the very language of the preamble.
Yeah.
Each word is loaded with meaning, carefully chosen to signal the kind of nation India aspired to be.
Okay, let's break down these keywords, starting with sovereign,
Sure.
like a declaration of independence, right?
Absolutely. It asserts India's freedom from external control and its power to govern itself internally.
Okay.
There's a case, Synthetic and Chemicals, LTD State of Uttar Pradesh from 1989,
Okay.
where the court specifically addressed the meaning of sovereign.
What's interesting is that the court didn't interpret sovereign as absolute unlimited power.
Right.
They emphasized that even the state's power is exercised within the boundaries set by the Constitution itself.
Exactly. Sovereignty within a framework, not unchecked authority.
Okay.
And then comes socialist, which was added later by the 42nd Amendment in 1976.
Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. Does socialist mean India's going full-on communist, abolishing private property and all that?
Not quite. India follows a model of democratic socialism where both the public and private sectors have a role to play. Cases like Excelware v. Union of India and Diasnacara v. Union of India really shed light on how the courts have interpreted socialist in practice.
From what I'm gathering, it's less about eliminating private ownership and more about achieving a decent standard of living for everyone, right? Like balancing economic growth with social welfare.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about creating a more equitable society, but not through extreme measures. And then we have secular, also added by the 42nd Amendment.
It's a good deal.
Especially in a country as diverse as India.
And it's interesting, one source even pointed out that the S.R. Bommai v. Union of India case from 1994 actually highlighted how the concept of secularism was deeply rooted in India's constitutional philosophy, even before it was explicitly mentioned in the preamble.
That's an excellent point. It shows how judicial interpretations can solidify and even expand the meaning of the preamble over time.
Okay, so we've covered sovereign, socialist, and secular. What about democratic and republic?
Right.
Aren't those kind of self-explanatory?
They might seem straightforward, but they're crucial for understanding the structure of India's government.
Yeah.
Democratic signifies that the ultimate power lies with the people expressed through free and fair elections.
Okay.
Republic, on the other hand, tells us that the head of state is an elected president, not a hereditary monarch.
So no kings or queens here.
Right.
It's all about the people and their elected representatives.
Exactly.
But the preamble doesn't stop at defining what kind of nation India is. It goes further, outlining 4 core objectives:
Yes.
justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity.
And these aren't just lofty ideals, they're meant to be actionable goals,
Okay.
guiding principles woven into the fabric of Indian law and society.
Hmm.
Let's dive into justice first.
All right, break it down for us. Sure. What does justice in the Indian context actually mean?
Well, it's multifaceted, encompassing social, economic, and political justice.
Okay.
The Constitution, informed by the Preamble, aims to achieve these by removing inequalities, ensuring fair treatment under the law, and promoting equal opportunities.
Wait, so does this mean that just because the preamble mentions justice, it automatically translates into specific laws and policies? How does that actually work?
That's a great question, and that's where things get really interesting. We'll pick it up right there in part 2 of this deep dive. You asked how the preamble's mention of justice translates into actual laws and policies. Well, think of the preamble as a guiding star for lawmakers and judges. It sets the tone, the overall objective. So when Parliament drafts a law or the Supreme Court interprets a legal provision, they have to keep those preamble objectives in mind.
Okay, so it's not like the preamble magically creates laws, but it acts as a filter,
Right.
a framework for ensuring that the laws we do have are aligned with those core values.
Precisely. And that's why understanding the preamble is so crucial for law students. It helps you understand the why behind the legal system. For example, the preamble's emphasis on justice helps explain the existence of things like anti-discrimination laws
Right.
and affirmative action policies.
So it's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture. We've got justice covered.
Right.
What about liberty? Isn't that basically just freedom to do whatever you want?
Not quite. Liberty in the Indian context is about freedom within the framework of the Constitution. One source actually emphasizes that the preamble itself acknowledges that there can be limitations on liberty.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't have absolute freedom that infringes on the rights of others or completely disrupts public order.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. Individual freedom alongside a functioning society. It's a constant balancing act. And then there's equality, which is a huge deal in India, especially with our history of caste-based discrimination.
From what I've read, the preamble recognizes equality in multiple dimensions,
Mm-hmm.
civic, political, and economic. But how do we actually achieve true equality in a country as diverse and complex as India? Isn't that a bit of a pipe dream?
It's definitely a challenge, but the preamble provides the roadmap, the guiding principles. The Constitution, through various articles and directive principles, strives to turn that ideal of equality into reality.
It's like that famous quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. The preamble is sort of like that arc, always pointing us towards a more equitable future, even if we're not quite there yet.
Beautifully put. And then, of course, we have fraternity, which is often overlooked, but equally important.
Yeah, fraternity sounds a bit old-fashioned, but it's basically about the spirit of brotherhood, unity, and solidarity among all Indians, regardless of their differences.
And in a country as diverse as India, that concept of fraternity, of seeing each other as fellow citizens despite our differences, becomes even more crucial.
So we've got these 4 pillars: justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. All very noble, very inspiring. But there's a nagging question in my mind. Is the preamble actually legally binding? Does it hold any real weight in court? Because some sources present conflicting opinions.
Ah, that's where things get really interesting. The preamble's legal status hasn't always been clear-cut. There have been landmark cases, fierce debates, and evolving interpretations.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the legal drama.
Well, it all started with the Barubar Union case in 1960. The question was whether the government could cede territory to another country. The Supreme Court, in their ruling, said that the preamble wasn't actually part of the Constitution.
Wait, what? So for a while there, the preamble was just symbolic.
Right.
A nice thought, but not legally enforceable.
That was the prevailing view for a time. The preamble was seen as a guiding principle, aspirational, but not something you could directly use in a legal argument.
That seems a bit odd, though. Why include it at all if it doesn't have any real legal teeth?
That's precisely what many legal scholars argued. And then came the Kesavananda Faradi case, which completely changed the game.
Okay, this is where things get juicy. Hit me with the details.
This case was about Parliament's power to amend the Constitution. The Supreme Court, in a historic decision, said there were limits to that power. They declared that there's a basic structure to the Constitution, a set of core principles that even Parliament can't change.
I'm seeing where this is going. The preamble is part of that basic structure, right?
You got it. The court recognized the preamble as an integral part of the Constitution, not just some decorative preface. And they did this by arguing that the preamble encapsulates the very essence of the Constitution, its core identity.
So tamper with the preamble, and you're messing with the fundamental building blocks of India's legal system. That's huge.
Exactly. And it had a profound impact on how the preamble is viewed and used in legal arguments. Courts now use it as a guiding light, a lens through which to understand other articles and provisions.
So the preamble went from being a non-justiciable text to a document with serious legal weight. What a comeback story. But it also raises a question, if the preamble is now part of the Constitution's basic structure, does that mean it can never be amended?
That's a question that's been debated fiercely among legal scholars. While the Kesavananda Bharati case established that the preamble can be amended, it also emphasized the inviolability of the basic structure.
So any amendment that fundamentally changes the preamble's core message, its essential character, would likely face legal challenges. It's like walking a tightrope.
Exactly. And that's where the role of the judiciary becomes crucial. They are the guardians of the Constitution, and it's their duty to ensure that any amendments, including those to the preamble, don't violate its basic structure.
So the preamble can evolve, but it can't be completely overturned. It's a living document, but within certain boundaries. This is getting complex.
It is, and that's what makes it so fascinating. The preamble is a dynamic force within Indian law, constantly being reinterpreted, and applied to new challenges.
I'm starting to see why they call it a deep dive. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing more and more complexity with each layer. But before we get lost in all the legal intricacies, can we lighten things up a bit? I read somewhere that the preamble has a surprising connection to the French Revolution.
Absolutely. One source mentions that the preamble's emphasis on liberty, equality, and fraternity directly echoes the French motto from that era. It's fascinating to see how ideas transcend borders and historical periods.
It makes you realize that the preamble isn't just some dry legal text. It's a product of history, of global intellectual currents, of the aspirations of a nation struggling for freedom and justice.
But how does all of this actually apply to us as law students in India today?
That's the million-dollar question, and we're going to tackle it head-on in part 3 of this deep dive. Stay tuned, because this is where the preamble gets real.
All right, we've explored the history, the keywords, the legal battles,
Right.
even some fun trivia surrounding the preamble.
Mm.
It's clear that this document went from a seemingly symbolic statement to a powerful legal tool.
Capable of shaping laws and influencing court judgments.
Right.
But how does all of this actually help us
Yeah.
as law students navigating the complexities of the Indian legal system?
Well, think of it this way. You're about to embark on a career where you'll be dealing with laws, cases, and legal arguments day in and day out.
Right.
The preamble acts as a compass, a guiding principle that helps you make sense of it all.
So it's not just about memorizing articles and sections. It's about understanding the underlying spirit of the Constitution, the values it aims to uphold.
Exactly. Whenever you encounter a complex legal issue,
Okay.
a tricky case, or a seemingly contradictory provision, refer back to the preamble,
Yeah.
it can help you clarify the purpose, the intention behind the law.
It's like having a North Star,
Mm.
always pointing you in the right direction, even when the legal seas get rough.
Yeah.
But let's get specific. How does the preamble actually play out in real-world legal scenarios?
One area where the preamble has been incredibly influential is in the realm of fundamental rights. Think about the right to equality, for example. The preamble's emphasis on equality has been used by courts to strike down discriminatory laws and policies.
I'm seeing that in some of our sources too. There's a whole body of case law that draws on the preamble to expand the scope of equality,
Yes.
ensuring that it encompasses not just formal equality, but also substantive equality.
Right, and that's a crucial distinction.
Okay.
Formal equality means everyone's treated the same on paper,
Right.
but substantive equality takes into account the real-life disadvantages faced by certain groups and seeks to level the playing field. The preamble has been instrumental in pushing for that broader understanding of equality.
So it's not just about abstract principles, it's about using the preamble to advocate for real change,
Yeah,
to challenge laws and practices that fall short of its ideals.
exactly. And that's where you, as future legal minds, come in.
Right.
You have the power to use the preamble to shape the legal landscape, to push for a more just and equitable society.
It's a lot of responsibility, but also incredibly empowering. But this is something that's been bugging me. The preamble talks about securing justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity for all citizens.
Right.
Sounds straightforward, but India is incredibly diverse. Different languages, religions, cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds. How do we ensure that the preamble's promise isn't just empty words for certain groups, that it truly reaches everyone?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's a challenge that India has been grappling with since its independence. The preamble acts as a constant reminder, a challenge to ensure that its lofty ideals are translated into reality for every individual.
So it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Right.
The pursuit of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity is an ongoing process.
Precisely. It requires constant vigilance, advocacy, and a willingness to challenge laws, policies, and social norms that fall short of the preamble's aspirations.
Okay.
Think about areas where those aspirations are still facing hurdles: access to justice for marginalized communities, economic disparities, discrimination based on caste or gender.
These are complex issues with no easy solutions.
Right.
But the preamble provides the framework,
Yes.
the guiding principles to help us navigate these challenges.
It calls on us to think critically, to question assumptions, and to use our legal skills to advocate for a more just and equitable society, one that truly lives up to the preamble's ideals.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the preamble, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
The preamble is not just a piece of paper.
Right.
It's a living document, a call to action. It's a reminder of the kind of nation India aspires to be.
Right.
And it's a challenge to each of us to play our part in making that vision a reality.
So to all the aspiring lawyers out there, embrace the preamble,
Right.
study it, question it, debate it,
Yes.
and most importantly, use it as a guiding principle in your legal journey.
Exactly.
The journey towards a truly just and equitable India continues. And you are now part of that story. Thank you for listening to LexTalks. Follow, subscribe, and stay notified to never miss an episode.